Great. Welcome, everybody. Claire Wasserman here, founder and author of Ladies Get Paid, an educational platform, global community, and book all about helping women level up professionally and financially. And I'm just so excited to see you all. I know this is technically a job seeker support group, but could we just say it's like a support group in general? Because I'm seeing a few people who actually got jobs. And they're still here, which is awesome. But let me first give you kind of a rundown for what's going on in these support groups on Mondays. I typically like to start with a highlighting of somebody in the community who can share a bit of words of wisdom as they journey on to finding their next role, and in that, hopefully finding themselves and understanding more about themselves and patience with themselves. And so that's going to be Allie Hickerson this morning. Then after that, I'm going to be doing a screen share of a job description. We're going to go through it together to really pick out the best elements of it to craft our case for why we are great. And you can use this in a cover letter and an interview and even an annual review. After that, we'll do breakouts. So at that point, I will stop the record. I see that we've got about 51 people here today, and there's about 151 who registered. So most people like to watch after the fact, but come live so you can meet new people. And in those breakouts, I think we'll do a prompt off of the exercise of the job description before. In the meantime, use the chat, take advantage of the fact that we are here live. So say where you're calling in from, drop your LinkedIn, let's tap into each other's networks, really, use the support group for support. So in that realm, I'm going to throw it over to Allie because just hearing her story, let's add the pin. Okay, so Allie, I'm going to ask, well, first of all, let me just make sure everybody's on mute except for you. But Allie, I'm going to give you a quick intro or just to say kind of how we, how you came to join us. I noticed on LinkedIn, you had posted this great article that you wrote about coming to New York or moving to New York, I think without a job, which was also like me when I first moved to New York about, I guess, 12 years ago at this point. And something that I loved about the story that you shared on LinkedIn was that you commented that it felt vulnerable, and that the reason you did it is because you remembered how inspired you were when you heard from other women who overcame hardships and setbacks and found creative ways to succeed. And, and you said, well, here goes nothing. Well, here goes something, because I'd love you to share a little bit of your story just to get us, excited for the week, motivated. And also, if you are looking for a job still, tell us what you're looking for and how to connect with you.
Great. Well, thanks for the intro. I feel vulnerable again sharing the story with you all, but no, this is a safe space. I went to one of the first meetings you did for job seekers and was really inspired, Claire, when you shared about all the times you've been unemployed, from times you got fired to, whatever the case may be. It's like, if someone like this can feel like, if I can feel connected to someone in that way, it made me feel a lot better about my situation. So I knew other people could relate. So I did move to New York when I was unemployed. I know it sounds kind of crazy moving to one of the, most expensive cities in the world when you are in a position financially and emotionally that way. But I just want to offer a couple tips about how I made that decision and how I kept myself afloat during a very unstable time. So I'm an American, but I had a long, unexpected life and professional career in Australia for about a decade. And when I came back to the States after a hard breakup, I was like, what the hell do I do now? Didn't have the job lined up, et cetera. So I began to squirrel away a lot of acorns of wisdom from places like Ladies Get Paid and other sources to think about like what the hell I do now. And so one of the first things I did, of course, before I made the decision to move while unemployed was I did the math, which is, the most depressing part. And tried to use cost of living calculators and tap into some friends and acquaintances I had in the city to figure out how much do I actually need for a salary, to even envision, living there successfully, and how much money do I need to have saved when I make the move, to make sure that I'm not living in a state of constant scarcity, because that is a very hard place to be in when you are embarking on a job search when you want to feel confident. So I did the math. I had about 4 months worth of living expenses saved away. And I actually started the job search before I moved to New York City. So I got the permission from my best friend to put her postal address on my resume, which is legal if you get permission. And I did that because sometimes employers are scared by, pursuing the idea of having someone work for them who lives from somewhere far away. So I didn't want them to feel like they needed to pay for my move or anything like that. And in the cover letter, I disclosed that I was applying remotely, but I had full intentions of moving to this address once I got a job. And so all of my interviews were virtual before I moved to the city. And something I felt was important before I moved was I wanted to know that, number one, did I have the money saved, but did I also have the sort of qualifications and experiences that would make me feel like I could be successful in a place like New York City? I don't know if everyone has this idea in their heads about, it being a cutthroat place, but that's what I had in my mind. And I wanted to make sure that I could feel confident that I could make it once I got here. So I had 3 jobs where I was in the running. I found that the career path I have, which is in communications and PR, was super challenging in terms of the job search. I think each of the 3 jobs had 5 rounds of interviews. The final one that I had was 5 rounds, and the final round of interviews was 4 hours long with an impromptu presentation, and it was just really intense. And I didn't get any of those jobs in the end. Which was hard because I was like really ready to move and get going to New York City. But I did know that, okay, I got pretty damn close and I had itchy feet. And so off I went and I moved to New York. So when I arrived, my best friend said that I was the busiest person she knew that was unemployed. I, by day, was, applying for jobs, networking, et cetera. But then I also took some, very part-time jobs, nannying, and doing some things to, again, just like pad my income or the money I had in the bank a little bit. But I didn't want to focus on taking a job that would take too much of my energy, because I felt like if I did that, then I wouldn't have the energy to look for the full dream job. So some tips I have about that is just, I think we all probably know, but networking can take place anywhere. Even recently, I've been doing some dog walking on the side, and I've been meeting great people at the dog park, even though it's not my own dog. I think like as long as you put yourself out there in a genuine way and don't seem like you're pleading too much, people are really willing to help you. I even use Eventbrite and things like that, where you're in an in-person setting and that there's an easy way to make a genuine connection with someone, and then maybe go online and take it from there and continue a conversation about what your job dream looks like. So I was putting out all the feelers, and I even applied eventually for a job that was under me, I felt, in terms of like my qualifications, but I did that because I was really genuinely interested in what the organization was doing. And then I quickly climbed the ladder from a volunteer blog writer all the way up to chief of staff and head of their PR function in just a matter of months. So, believing in yourself really, really helps. But also knowing that you like the place you're working at, I think was really important for me to get my confidence back and start the ball rolling. A bit more of advice I have, Claire, I hope I'm not like talking way too long. I feel like I could talk about this forever. Was that I really realized, because I was hustling so hard and embodying that like energy of New York, I was burning out super quickly. I was like applying for jobs at all hours. I didn't have any constraints on myself. And that quickly led me to a decrease in energy and focus and all of those things. So I really think that remembering to take time to rest and having faith in that it will happen is really helpful. And I am unemployed again, unfortunately. I'm still living in New York. I just celebrated my 4-year anniversary yesterday. But I'm unemployed again. I was part of the Google layoffs. And a couple things I've learned since is a couple things. I'm an anxious person generally. And something my therapist said recently that I really loved was that one of the antidotes to anxiety is action. And I felt really disenchanted with the corporate world and all sorts of employers after this happened. I thought like working at a place like Google would be one of the most stable jobs I could have. And I found that, I was sort of depressed. I didn't really want to do anything about my job search, but just making little steps like signing up and being part of these conversations has really helped me get the ball rolling again. I also think, I'm still doing those odd jobs on the side and doing that hustle because, again, you never know what door will open. And I don't want to feel like I'm in a scarcity mindset. And then this is like a kind of a woo-woo thing I've been doing. I put up pictures of myself as a child. This is me like blowing out a candle and wishing really hard. And then this is me with my first piece of writing that I wrote for an Earth Day poem contest in 3rd grade. And this like really reminds me of, I have a dream, I have one life, just, fight like hell to make it happen. And it can happen if you, remember that childlike joy. And then lastly, I have like a ritual where I light a candle. This says like alleged money drawing candle. I don't know, I got it from a bizarre shop. But every time I am doing something where I'm like trying to generate money or connections or whatever, I light it and it kind of reminds me that I am in that mode right now. I'm not in like personal free time mode. And that helps me compartmentalize my life a little bit better. So hopefully those were some helpful tips, and I'll drop my article link in the chat too, if that's helpful. Yes, and I am still looking for jobs. I work in content writing and like to cover a variety of sectors. So if anybody's looking for help, hit me up.
Phoebe,
Thanks,
my cat was riveted by you. You can't see her. She's right down here. She was like, oh, funny thing. Also, I want to comment. Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. And Anne goes, I'm not leaving. Just got to get laundry out. BRP. I appreciate that you wanted to let us know that. Also, huge fan of having child photos and also money candles. Although funny story off of that, my co-founder and wife, Ashley. So we have a money candle and we were going through some money struggles. And so she goes to light the candle and it exploded in her eye. So just be careful. And yes, it had a burn on her eye. And we thought at that point, you just got to laugh. Kind of like, it's like you're working for Google, you think you're set. And it's like, bring it on. At some point, I got to ride the waves and sharing this. I hope it felt good to you. And I know that there are people here who appreciated it. I mean, Megan said, as someone who also struggles with heavy anxiety, I appreciate hearing your advice. It truly is this balance though, right? Of like action, but rest, faith, but action also, it's like you got to put in the work. So it meant a money explosion. Yeah. So everything you shared was really resonant with me, and I know it seems with other people. So thank you, Allie. Okay, so I'm gonna just jump right into sharing my screen. This is a thank you to Lexi, who's here, because this was off of some work that we did together regarding a job description of a job that she was applying for. I'm not going to show you what she wrote, so I'm keeping this real, so I just want to thank you, Lexi, but we're not going to show all of your personal information. Okay, so just to let you all see, can everybody, by the way, we all see it here? Thumbs up. Okay, great. So, this is the job description, just so you can all, Oh, we can also see Johnny's message to me. Okay, great. So here's the process that I want to talk to you about. And this is good for anybody, yes, looking for work, but also if you are gearing up for an annual review, this would, I'm sure, also be helpful for you to do. So this is the process that I want to walk you through. Take the job description of where you'd like to apply and copy and paste it into a separate document. And what you're going to do is break it into as many chunks as possible, because we are trying to find essentially what's most important to them. And that can be hard to read when it's, just listed all in one place like this, right? Because there's little things, little hidden Easter eggs and words that may keep coming up that you don't really realize until you break it down in this way. One second, I'm going to cough. Okay. So this might not make a lot of sense right now as you're looking at it, because this is not the job you're applying to, unless you're Lexi. But I want to show you how much dissection, chunking up I'm actually talking about here. So it's effectively every line I went through here. Okay. So you can see, I'm putting little arrows here for everything that I want us to pay attention to. Okay. All right. So you see so many things. Don't let this overwhelm you, because just look at it as an exploration of, it's going to give you more direction for what to talk about when it comes to your own past experience. So the more chunking you do here, the more direction you will have. So this is a good thing. Okay. Now, as you go through and break it into chunks, I want you to, underneath each chunk, all right, that you do, make a little bullet point of any kind of previous experience you've had that in any way, shape, or form is relevant. Now, don't start to judge yourself. Don't start to edit it. Don't start, no opinions. We're not writing out the whole story. We're just little bullet points of reminders. Okay. And if they're, if you're looking at something, for example, here, pregnancy prevention, right? Maybe you didn't have past experience that had to do with pregnancy prevention. That's okay. All right. Maybe just make a little asterisk there, because later on we'll decide, is there an example that you have that could speak to this? Do we need to get ahead of it and talk about why, yes, you don't have that relevant experience, but being an outside perspective actually is a good thing, right? So no judgment, no freak out, just make a little note of it. So as you go through all of these things, just make little bullet points of previous experience that might speak to it. Okay. And also, if there's anything that you're confused about, where it's either not clearly written or is a little ambiguous, it's ambiguous, also make an asterisk, because that's a question to ask them, whether you want to reach out prior or during the interview, it's a discussion point. Okay. Go through. All right. Now, after you make all of, the case study notations here, then you're going to see, are there any of your previous experiences, your case studies, that you have mentioned multiple times? All right. Because those are going to be the ones that we really flesh out, or at least we'll begin by fleshing out. All right. So let's say there's maybe 4 experiences, 4 or 5 that really kept coming up, as you went through this. I want you to flesh them out in writing. Don't jump to the point where you are practicing your interview yet. We're not there yet. I want you to write it out like you are writing a screenplay and you are the main character, because hi, Phoebe, because I find that we, first of all, devil's in the details. We are way too close to ourselves. We take ourselves for granted. And whenever I do this kind of work with other women and I have them dig into the details, I discover incredible things about their process. Okay. So no detail is too small. A great framework for telling your story, and many of you have heard this one before, but it's worth saying again, the STAR method. And we'll be online together and we can continue to share this information with each other. But STAR method, it's an acronym. So STAR, set the scene, give me context to your case study, especially what was at stake if you can. There's always something at stake. Like, put yourself in the shoes of the business owner, assuming you worked for someone else. This is a case study you're bringing up, right? Like, what were the resources given to you or not given to you? And what was riding on this, right? What did, from a business standpoint, what was this going to mean for them? This is going to make it way more compelling. Okay. It's also going to show that you think like a business owner. And that's also memorable. T stands for task. Okay. What were you given to do, or what did you take on? A, action. What did you do? But most interestingly, how did you do it? Right? R, result. What happened? And if you can tie it to the business impact, quantify it as best as you can. Fabulous. I'm not going to go too much into detail on that, because for all intents and purposes right here, we're talking about dissecting a job description here. Okay. Now, here's the part that is going to make you stand out. As you describe the things that you've done, as you speak to each of these little bullet points, these little chunks, I want you to talk about what was hard about it. Not that it was necessarily difficult for you per se. I mean, it could have been, and then you talk about how you overcame it. But what is just tricky in that bullet point to begin with? Let me give you an example, because I did this with Lexi. And if Lexi wants to jump on and talk about it as well, welcome you to do that, but no need, or no pressure. So, as I'm going through this with Lexi, and, she's talking to me about establishing trust and rapport, collaborating with partners, this may come naturally for her, but I'm thinking, this seems like it could be difficult, actually. Like, not everybody is naturally gifted at doing this. So I really pushed her to give me examples of a time where maybe the trust was not there to begin with. And how did she work through that? Okay. I'm, working collaboratively with human services agencies, right? I'm looking at this thinking, there's probably a lot of BS that goes into this, right? Like, there's bureaucracy. When you collaborate, there's tension there. People have different agendas, egos, information sharing can be hard. To iteratively test implementation strategies and gather information. I really, this is a chunk that I pulled out here, but we can even go further. What about the word iteratively? I mean, first of all, I can't even pronounce it, but that's okay. Right. So the meaning, you're going to pivot quickly, right? You try something, you see how it goes. And then, after that, you determine, let's actually pivot a little bit and try something new, right? This, to me, it seems like a challenge, especially if you don't have much budget, right? So point being, as you go through all of the chunks of the job description and you reflect on relevant case studies, previous experiences you have, really look at what is so challenging about this. Again, even if it wasn't challenging for you, for an outsider looking in, there are so many nuances to crap you're going to have to work through to actually accomplish this and accomplish it successfully. When you tell the story of your work, do it through the lens of how things were tricky, because what you are showing to them at the end of the day is that you are somebody worth investing in. And we invest in people who we believe have the capacity for growth. And so for those of you who are listening to me going, yeah, I mean, I don't even have relevant job experience. That's a creative challenge to solve, but it actually sets you up well to really make the case for how you learn quickly, how you're self-motivated, how you can make things out of nothing, how you have bravery and resilience in trying something new. So again, if the whole point of all this is not just, I have the perfect experience and that's why you should hire me. I mean, in fact, I might actually hear that and think, this person's going to be bored. This person's going to leave, join my company, but leave pretty quickly. Right? I want to see somebody who's hungry for growth too and has the capacity for growth. Okay. So chunk. All right. And then also I want you to notice if there were certain words, right, themes that kept coming up. I mean, both for, the case studies that you have noticed that you keep bulleting out, but also are there certain words that they're using over and over again? And not just the same word, but synonyms, right? Because that way we can go, all right, it looks like they've got about 3 values or 3 strengths that are clearly important to them because they have used a synonym 1,000 times for this word, right? Now you have an indication for what you need to be weaving into the story you tell about who you are and what you're capable of. I'm actually going to stop the share because I'm happy to reshare, but we're going to focus on me. Okay. Right. So and at the end of the day here, what you are helping them understand about you, or what a great way to work backward, a great thing to work backwards from, I think, is after the interview, if they were to go to somebody else and describe you and what you're capable of, what would you like them to say about you? Make this as easy as possible for them. Okay. And so in that, describing your strengths, right? Describing kind of your mission or motivation, like why this job? Why do you care about it? And then your uniqueness, right? Which could be in the form of the way you think, the fact that you bring an outsider's perspective potentially, or maybe it's your personality, so that's a little bit, can be a bit trickier to figure out because again, we're too close to ourselves. So I would also encourage you, as you are really identifying the best case studies to present to them, if it's possible for you to go back to the people you used to work with, okay, and get some perspective from them. Maybe you even want to weave that in. You might even want to say, in preparation for this, I actually reached out to my old boss and I asked them what their sort of biggest takeaway was from my work ethic, or my process. And, this is what they said about me, right? Like, show them that you researched, you researched your own life as much as you researched them. And when you do go into the actual interview, and in future sessions, we'll do, something specific to interview questions. Because again, today I wanted to focus really more on the dissection of a job description. But when you do go into that interview, I would like you to imagine it not so much as them determining whether or not you're a good fit for the job, because you already got the interview, meaning you are a good fit for the job. What they are trying to figure out is how well that they can imagine you work with the team, I think, and if you stand out. So I would go into that interview imagining you already got the job, and this is a way for you to figure out with them how to best leverage your strengths for their business objectives. And that also means coming in with questions about their business objectives, digging into certain things that you pulled from their job description. I think in the one that I just shared, I noticed when Lex and I worked on it, there was a line that she had written that said something like, have them define equity, right? Because that can be, a lot of people look at equity in different ways. And so I would love in that first interview that you have with them for it to feel more like a strategy session between the two of you, like a peer-to-peer session, rather than this one-sided interview. Okay. Where you're walking away from it, and they're walking away from it going, wow, that was a really interesting conversation. It's a really interesting person. And again, you don't have to have interesting things in your background. No, it's the way that you think. It's the way that you think, the way that you articulate. This is going to come with practice. So remember when I said you're going to write out a description of your case studies like it's a movie, no detail too small? Okay, well, at some point, then we got to cut it down, right? And be concise about it. And so give yourself, maybe you edit it as a first round, but you got to share it with somebody. Listen, I wrote, this book. This had 2 editors on it. Okay. Actually more if you count Ashley and maybe my cat too. Right. So like we all need outside perspective to quote, cut the fat on it. But I do want you to start really wide with all the details. You cut it down and then you practice it and just hear yourself say it over and over again. And as you figure out all the case studies that you want to talk about, make sure that each one represents a different aspect about yourself too. Right. So again, if we've seen in the dissection of that job description that there are like 4 or 5 values and strengths that are clearly important to them, you're going to have case studies that each represent one of them to the best of your ability. Right. Okay. So we are, I don't know, Lexi, do you have anything you want to say off of the experience you had in dissecting this job description? I don't mean to put you on the spot. And by the way, Anne just asked, what is the S? So set the scene. So the who, what, when, where, why of this case study, give us context. And then, so Lexi, do you want to maybe unmute? I'll ask you to unmute if you feel like, if you're comfortable just sharing whatever you feel like is relevant.
Yeah. So Claire and I worked on this job description to help me for a phone screen. Certainly probably more than you need to do for a phone screen, but the prep will go beyond that when I'm selected for the next round. So I had this phone screen last week. So yeah, I would say that when I'm talking about myself, I get very like off track and can just like go down a rabbit hole, and I have to like reel myself back in. So trying to fine tune to the job description was really helpful for me, because I'm like, okay, these are the stories that are really most relevant to what they're looking for. And it doesn't even have to be like necessarily like topically relevant. If you don't necessarily like say I didn't have experience in pregnancy prevention, like that's okay. You can talk about, other work that you've done that would demonstrate this skill. Doesn't have to be industry specific. And then that helped me to kind of put boundaries on what I would talk about, so that I wouldn't go on rambling, which I need to work on. But also Claire and I, okay, I'll give an example of a visual example, because Angela's asking in the messages. So one of the parts of the job dissection that we went through was talking about building trust and rapport. Claire mentioned it briefly. And I told Claire a story about, so I used to work as a researcher doing qualitative interviews for folks who were experiencing food insecurity. Very, it's a topic that is very sensitive. And so I would have folks on the call who may have their walls up at first. Our process was to record our meeting, our interviews, so we could go back and be able to make sure our notes are matching. This person did not want to go on video. They did not want to be recorded. But I just made sure to make them feel comfortable. My probing question, because I feel, probing questions are important to make people feel comfortable, was about, their favorite childhood food. And then she got on talking about her mother and a meal her mother would make. And she was like, you know what, actually, can you record this? And then she started all over again and told this story because she wanted her story to be heard. So that is an example of more of like a concrete story to match with that trust and rapport. Because like Claire told me in that session I had, like, yeah, you can say that you have experience building trust and rapport with clients. Like anyone can say that. Can you give a story that helps them visualize that?
Thank you, by the way.
So,
thank you for bringing that up. This is why it's helpful. I hate doing monologues. I'd rather just do interviews, clearly. But it's true, because anyone can say anything, and if you can't give me a visualization, if I can't picture you doing this, it's going to be A, hard for me to believe that you did it, or regardless of that, B, I'm not going to remember you. Like, it's the stories that make us memorable. And also, as the potential employer, I can now picture you doing this for my company too. So that's why it's so important. And by the way, in the telling of the story, it could be 1 second. Like this is not, again, we start with all the details and, it's getting to the concise part is like 5 drafts later. So, don't worry about that part yet. Also, Sarah just said, I also heard the word stakes, which I loved. Why did this situation matter to the business? Yes. Like, what was riding on this? Even in that exchange with this woman who you got to trust what was this going to mean for your work? And then I want to take it even a next step further for that. What did this do for you as just a person in the industry, right? Like, what did you learn about yourself, your skills, how to do work moving forward, right? Because that's part of the whole pitching them on your capacity for growth, being able to like take this moment in time, this story, and then extrapolate it to here's how then it triggered me to learn and grow in all these other ways or whatever. Again, I know it all sounds like a lot, but when you practice it, you could get it down to like 2 sentences. And I apologize, you were saying something. Oh, ask you to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, I don't know where I was leaving off with, but yeah, I guess just having, like I said, being able to show, not just tell. Yeah, it's kind of like obvious advice, but and I think, Claire, we also talked about like kind of sandwiching the interview. So like starting off when they ask you about yourself, like really kind of working those like your key message of what you're trying to portray, and then reaffirming that at the end so that that's what they're left with and that's what they're thinking about when they remember your interview.
Yeah, first impressions and last impressions are the most important. And so being able to express the key things about yourself that you want to express that they can now easily tell somebody else, because chances are they're not the decision maker and you want to really help them go to bat for you. But you'll know what to say after you've dissected the job description, because you're going to see over and over again, there are certain themes that are just clearly important to them. And again, even if they're using different words, chances are they're all kind of synonyms for things. So extrapolating from that and saying, all right, here as a package, here are like the strengths and the values that I reflect back, integrating their keywords as best you can. And if you just practice it, don't feel like you can't write it down too, and read it off a piece of paper and tell them you're nervous. That's okay. Right. Tell them like, this is you're really trying to get better at interviewing. And, you did a lot of work leading into this because you're, just care so much about the job. And so I hope nobody's feeling like this is now an overwhelming thing that they have to, memorize. Somebody had commented, quick question, all of these little stories, etc., where do they go in the interview and cover letter, but not the resume? Right. This, by the way, this exercise, I would do it to help inform your resume, because we all have a template of a resume, but we need to be tweaking it based on the job that we apply to, because each job is going to have different words that they've used that clearly exemplify what's most important to them. So, I mean, that also, there was somebody who emailed me and said, use Chat GPT, and I haven't dug into that yet. So I encourage, I can't speak to that, but I would say this is just a good exercise at the beginning of your job journey to help inform all of your materials. But I want everyone to do this specifically for both cover letters and interviews. In another session, we can talk more about cover letters. Again, today was really just showing you how to dissect the job description for what's most important. Oh, good. Lexi said she's happy to help with a Chat GPT session. Cool. Yeah, let's talk about that.
I just wanted to mention one other thing before I unmute myself or mute myself. In our first session, so Claire and I had 2 sessions. The session before, you mentioned that you have this like one story that you really like to weave in, like the kind of the art of the shift. Like sometimes they ask you something and you answer that question, but you can kind of also add in. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
We're talking about imagining yourself like a politician, and when people ask you a question and you don't really have an answer for it, but you make them feel like you've answered it. In fact, you've really just said what you wanted to say about yourself. Was it that?
Yes, exactly. Because there are certain things that may not come across in their questions that you really want to portray. So sometimes being a little creative and figuring out how to mention that could also be helpful.
Yeah.
Because I didn't get to mention that story about me interviewing that person, but I think that could have been something that stuck in their mind. And if I had been a little more on my toes about how to shift into telling that story, it could have been impactful.
There also maybe wasn't a good time. You do your best to like take what you've heard them say and then say, and this made me, this reminded me of a time, if you can't do that because there's no organic way to weave it in, we can all at the end of it say, by the way, I know you didn't ask me about collaboration, but I noticed it was in the job description, and I really wanted to share a story from my life that is meaningful, that I think illustrates like who I am at work or something. So you can always take that moment at the end if you want. Catherine has a good question. I don't know if you can help answer it, but she said, what about vague job descriptions? For example, I'm in marketing content and they all talk about strategy. And in interviews, they want a blog writer. So I feel like I get to an impasse. Catherine, so this kind of sounds not just like it's vague. It sounds like it's misleading is what you're saying. I don't know, Catherine. Let me make sure. I know y'all can't unmute unless I do it. So let me just change the settings here. I don't know if you want to go into a little bit more detail. I can't figure out how to change the settings. God darn it. Oh, here we go. Okay. Allow yourself to unmute. All right. Catherine, do you want to just jump in real quick and explain a little bit what you mean about the struggle you're having with dissecting job descriptions?
Hey, Claire. Yeah, I would be happy to. So I just feel like in my fields, there are people who want these like unicorn candidates. And, just with everything in the job market right now, I just feel like they want this person who's got like big 50,000 foot view, like strategy mindsets. But at the end of the day, they want a content writer, which is fine. But like, I have all of this experience. And so it seems like my skill sets match that job description, but they want like a kind of, I don't know, like not strategy person, but the job description talks about that. So it's almost like they're saying that they want something, But when I get into a conversation with a hiring manager or whatnot, it's a lot less than what they're putting out there in the job description.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw me, but I took a big swig of caffeine on that one, on that question. First of all, that's a red flag. So this shows that this place maybe is kind of a shit show, or this, if you were to join the company, it's not going to be what you thought it was. So if it seems like everybody's doing this, that's one thing. But if not everybody's doing it, it's just a few folks, we're dodging bullets here to not work at those kinds of companies. Something that could be helpful, I'm going to answer your question in a second, but one way to get ahead of that is to go contact people who currently work at the company in the department that you're interested in, or somebody, and this would be very interesting, somebody who left, okay? I mean, obviously you're going to take everything they say with a certain grain of salt, but getting the intel for them, from them about what it's like to work there, and ask point blank, hey, you're saying one thing online in the job description, but when I talk to you, you're saying another thing. Out of curiosity, why is that? See if you can just get more information about the discrepancy. Is it that in the way that they describe it, that's like they could hire somebody who costs less? Like I wouldn't know until you get more information from them. So don't feel like you can't straight up ask, especially if you're couching in I want to do the best job I can and make sure I'm the best fit for you guys. So I'm noticing there is some discrepancy here. If you could give me more information on sort of why that is, or am I misreading it, right? So you'll figure out the best way to ask the question. But I think oftentimes when we're unsure of something and we don't know how to respond, maybe we just need to be asking different, questions instead. So that's one thing. The other thing is maybe speaking to both. Right. So, being able to straddle both the strategy and the writing, or, fact that this can be kind of left brain, right brain, and how you in the past have been able to do that, right? Like demonstrating that you're not just answering for one thing that you're hearing, but that you can do it all. But what are the challenges in doing it all? This kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that it's not just, yes, I can do it, but it's, how is this tricky? And how have I been able to, navigate my way through it? But I don't know if that was a great question or a great response, other than seems like there's some more questions that need to be asked of them.
Yeah, and some people in the chat are bringing up really valid points. One of them being that when you kind of go into that initial screening, which is usually like a phone call, like HR people don't know these nuanced terminologies, things like that. And that is a really big struggle. And so, I mean, they're in it, right? They're in the company, so they can like throw jargon around and, you ask for clarification. Do you use this type of wording, that type of thing? But I feel like to them, they're just like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. So it becomes this very odd barrier to entry. And that's just kind of some of my experiences that I've had.
Because they're not in the department that you're actually
right.
And that's why I would reach out to people who currently and also no longer work there in that department and say, hey, in this job description, I'm noticing, when I talked to the recruiter, they had something else to say, like, I'm curious for you, how much of your job, like what percentage of it was dedicated to actual strategy versus writing or whatever. So those questions are better served for the people in the department.
Yeah, very valid. Yep.
Yeah. By the way, I said we were going to do breakouts. So there's really great questions. So I think let's do the breakouts. I'm seeing our questions. People submitted awesome ones before too. Good news. We do these every Monday. Also, I'm hosting a LinkedIn Live every day, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And I'm going to cover stuff like this. So don't worry. I will get to everybody's question, but I do think, given the promise of networking, let's network. A good prompt. I think I'm going to just do one-on-ones here for about 6 minutes, and we'll come back together. And I think with that one-on-one, something that I would love for you to talk about is what by the end of the week, so this is not related to interviewing, but it's, I think, a good prompt to do, is what by the end of this week, when you reflect on everything that's gone on, what would make you proud? And I'm going to really push you to not say things like applying to 100 jobs, because shit happens, life gets in the way, you might not get to the 100 jobs, but something where it's really more about how you interacted with the world in your relationship with yourself in the world? How can you still be proud of yourself no matter what happens? Yeah, right. So what's the thing that you're working on, whether it's compassion or patience or motivation, or, encourage you to dig deep in those ways, as opposed to, again, that sort of external performance. But you know what? You're also an adult, and say whatever you want to say, my loves. Okay. So breakouts. Well, let's pause the recording, then we'll come back together. Okay, so for a limited time, I'm going to be doing, I just put it in the chat and I'll send it by email as well. I'm going to be offering what I did with Lexi. So 2-session package to dissect job descriptions with you one-on-one, and to go through your relevant case studies, help you tell it in a clear, compelling, and concise way. So that's session 1, and session 2 is actually practicing it. That's something Lexi and I did not do, is the actual practicing part. And I think probably she could have used it, given her feedback to me at the end of her interview. So really, really important. We all need outside perspective. Whether or not you go with me, maybe use the people that you met today. Stay in touch, please. I have a coach, I have a coach, I have a therapist. So I have a cat right next to me. Like, we all need outside guidance on this stuff. So I put that in the chat. It's also in the email. These, no, it is not free, because I host these for free. And we got to stay in business here too, but it is a worthy investment in yourself. Speaking of next week, just drop that in the chat if you want to sign up for next week's Motivation Monday. Or if you would like to see me again, if you're not sick of me yet, come join me today at noon Pacific time, so 3 p.m. Eastern, for a check-in. I think today I'm going to be talking about how to prioritize. So every day, Monday through Friday at noon Pacific time, I share a lesson in the hopes of, keeping myself motivated and accountable to making content, and hopefully for you as well, just because so many of us are still, at home and not getting the human contact that we all desperately need. By the way, if you want to just see what's coming up in the pipeline for Ladies Get Paid, you can go to ladiesgetpaid.com/events. And of course, ladiesgetpaid.com, sign up for our email list and our free platform. All this will be by email, of course. And Instagram too, Ladies Get Paid. And then me, I'm Claire Gets Paid on Instagram. And I collect all the questions that you send in. So even if I haven't yet responded to you, I have it in a spreadsheet, and I am putting together content to speak to your needs. Like, I'm here for whatever it is that you're looking to learn. So please, don't hesitate to share your journey, to reach out. Also, if you'd like to be highlighted at a future meetup, post on LinkedIn about us, share your story, like Allie did, and you might get me reaching out to you. And of course, no pressure, but I think sharing what we're going through, it's just so helpful to know we're not alone in whatever those experiences are. And just in the final moment of, at the end of the week, what would you be most proud of if you were to do or be in this world? Or just kind of like, how can you guarantee that you will still be proud of yourself no matter what happens? I think it's just keep showing up, for whatever it is. Go for that walk, do the thing you don't want to do. Meditate for 5 minutes. Be terrible at meditating for 5 minutes. It's practicing the muscle of just commitment and follow through. Journal every day. Write terribly. That's helping you get over your perfectionism, right? Like, it's the act of the doing. Well, of course, still balancing with rest. Okay. Back to Allie's point earlier of making sure that she was setting boundaries for herself. This is the long haul. Okay. This is a marathon that we're all running here. All right. So treat yourself well in that. All right. You guys got it. We got it. Lots of love. You're doing great. And if I don't see you during one of my lives, I'll see you next week on Monday. Oh, wait, we got to have Phoebe say goodbye. Phoebe. How you doing, Phoebes? All right. Be like Phoebes and sleep. All right. You got this.